You know what the most dangerous thing is in life? Cadbury eggs. All right, let's do this.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Summer Myers. I'm a homeschool mom of 6 kids. And on this channel, we talk about all things homeschool. And today I wanted to talk about the book, Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. And I wanted to talk about how I use it in my home and how I've taught 4 of my children how to read with this particular book. I think the reason why this book has been around for so long among the homeschooling community is because it is very affordable. It is one book. There's no manipulatives to it. There are no workbooks associated with it. It's just one big fat textbook. And when I was looking and researching for what I wanted to teach my oldest how to read, this one came up and I was like,
oh, 100 easy lessons. They're easy.
And when I initially did it, it was a bit of a struggle. And by the time I'm finishing up using it for my 4th, if I knew the things I do now, I would have done it so much differently than I did with my 1st. So this is a bit of a how-to teach with this book. It's also a review of why I like it. I will be posting an additional video sometime next month. I'm not entirely certain when. Talking about reading in particular, how children read, what's going on with their brain when they're reading, and just things that I have learned with child development and that sort of thing. And I'm going to give a disclaimer. I have not used any other reading programs because this one worked for me very well with my family, and I didn't see a huge reason to purchase something else and try it. So this might not be the easiest curriculum to use. However, this is the most affordable one. I don't have to supplement. I don't have to add anything else. I don't have to have manipulatives or anything. I literally just carry this book around, and for that reason, I still use it because it's just so cheap. It's like one of the cheapest homeschool books that I've ever bought and continue to use. So let's break it down, shall we? Now, I have used this book so much that I literally destroyed the cover. So I have a flexi binder. It's 3 rings, and I can fold it and spiral it to where I need it to be. It's absolutely worth it to get this spiral bound. They only sell paper copies of it. I will link down below what I did to get the cover and the binding off. I just used a hairdryer and I hole punched them and I popped them in this binder, and it has made life so much easier. I will say that the papers do tear, so this isn't quite, I wouldn't say a long-term thing. In retrospect, I wish I had just taken it into Staples or somewhere and had them spiral bounded for me. Something to consider. So let's do a flip through and show you exactly what the lessons look like. Okay, so let's do this flip through. Like I said, this is in a Flexi 5-star binder, and I have lost the title page. So it doesn't even show Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, but I promise that's what this book is. The introduction is very well worth the read. I find it fascinating because of just the history of teaching children how to read, and that's what this basically covers. It also just talks about how awesome the curriculum is. There is a parent's guide and talking about DISTAR. DISTAR is what they use by way of phonics, and that'll become more clear as further on as we go. So it does tell you how to teach it. I did not find it particularly helpful. So, know that there is that in here, but continue watching to the end of the flip through so you can see my practical tips on how to actually use this program. They have these pronunciation guides. In the beginning, I had a post-it note just here so I could refer back to them to remember what each symbol actually was supposed to sound like. That sounds a little intimidating. It really is not. It's not a big deal, and it's pretty intuitive when you think about it. Here it shows you how they suggest doing handwriting. I do not follow that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So here is the beginning of the book. It is all scripted. The entire thing is scripted for you. Eventually, it's going to become so intuitive to you that you will not need to read the script 100%. It'll just make sense. You'll know what you're doing. So let's look at lesson 1. Everything in pink is what you say to your child. Everything that's big and in bold is what they are saying to you. So here they're introducing a new sound, which is and you put your finger here on the dot and you drag it across the arrow, and then they have a new sound again, and you're just practicing the sounds. Let's go further in. So here's a new lesson where it's talking about rhyming. So at this point you have already learned all of these sounds. They're very quick, they go through them quickly, and your kids retain it very quickly. They have a rhyming section where you go through and they say, we're going to rhyme. Do not skip this. I think it's very clever. It's very smart the way they set it up. Here they're rhyming with the sound at. I don't know if you can kind of see that in the script. So your child would take their sound that they're working with and they'd go, mat. So what are you rhyming with? At. Rhyming with at. Okay, mat. All right, now we're going to rhyme with een. What are we rhyming with? Een. And then they go, mean. And that is showing how they can blend the sounds before they have actually learned E and N together. Continuing on, they have more words that you are practicing. They are not necessarily spelled in the very beginning the way they are supposed to be spelled. So, and we'll look at that in further lessons. But here we have the word eat. We're missing a small a. You're trying to focus on here is learning how to blend these two sounds together and eat. And initially I was worried that, oh, this is going to set them up for spelling failure, but really what it's doing is teaching your child how to blend two new sounds that they have just learned together. And then they have sound writing here. Let's go further on. I think what's really exciting for children is that they are blending sounds together relatively quickly and putting together words very quickly. So they only have to learn a couple of sounds before they can already read all of these words. And earlier I showed you where they were doing eat. Here now they're doing eat spelled correctly with an A. They have made the A small, so you do not say that sound. It is skipped. Eat. And that is just to get the child used to these two sounds being together. And it's mostly just to make sure that they are seeing how the word is supposed to be spelled, but also focusing on the phonetics of it. And this is actually how we say the word. So connecting the sounds with the letters. I'll point this out too. They have their D's shaped a special way to indicate easily and clearly the difference between D and B. I have not had trouble with any of my kids with D's and B's except for one, and that we had to address later on in her language arts curriculum, where I would practice her seeing B's and D's and identifying the two. But for the most part, between 4 children that I've done this, all 3 of them, this was enough. Some children might struggle with that, but I think this is intentionally set up in a way so they won't struggle with it. All right, here's our first story of the book. And here we have See Me Eat. You're supposed to have this covered. Typically what I'll do is I'll fold this book in half and we will sound it out. And then as a reward, after doing our second reading of it or whatever, we get to look at the picture. And then we get to discuss the picture. And we'll look at the picture and we'll go, oh, look, there's a boy and he's eating. And that's just what we read. And this connects it and it gives it comprehension. So part of the reason why they want you to hide the picture from the story is so that they can realize what the story is first for themselves based on what they sounded out and read for themselves before they pick up cues on here. And what's nice about it is that this is an early victory. I mean, we are literally not even into lesson 15. This is lesson 13, and already they have read a story. And that's very satisfying for a child who is just starting to read. Another cute story. Here, I'll pull it down so you can see it. See me read. This is a huge picture. There's no way I'd be able to avoid them seeing this unless I, thought ahead of time and put Post-it notes over it, which I have never done. So In this instance, I'm not as concerned. It doesn't bother me as much that they can see the dog and then he's reading a book and there's a lamp or whatever. After they have read the story, there is a picture comprehension, reinforces their comprehension and fluency. It also gives them a chance to explore what else is going on in the picture, and it kind of expands the lesson where it turns into a real discussion rather than just, this is me teaching you how to read. Something I always appreciate in all my curriculums. So let's skip on ahead to a little bit further on. Here we go. This is now lesson 28, so you're moving on to, you've been doing this for about a month now. There are these black squares in between. You're introducing periods. Nothing is capitalized. What you're doing is you're still focusing on phonetics and seeing the different words, giving them a breathing pause. And that's what these black squares are for. Here is an activity where you do word finding, where it says find the word an, and here we find and. We also are going to find the word ant. Here's ant. This is differentiating between the two. You can say that this is kind of a flashcard approach. However, I think it is smart in that it makes a child look for a whole word and also listening to sounds and connecting the sounds to what they hear. So if you're saying, let's find the word fat, and they're struggling and they can't find it, what you go is fat. What is the sound look for that, and they look and they say, oh, here's and then they can sound at. Oh, here it is, fat. Sometimes they pick it up really quickly and they're like, oh, it's right here, because they have connected the sounds of what you have said to what the letters look like. And that is another phonics-based approach that I appreciate they do. Okay, let's go further on. All right, here we have an example of words that they have to read, and then they have to read it again the fast way. And I'll talk about this in a minute at the end, but here we'll just introduce that idea where they have to sound out each of the words, and that is a lot of words to sound out, a lot of words. And very rarely will I do all of these words in one day. Literally, I will come and do a column between 3 days, and I'll do this, and then I'll do a column, and then I'll come back and I'll do this, and I'll do a column, and I'll come back and I'll do, I split it up because that is a lot for a child unless they're really, really getting it. After they have read a column, I go back and I say, okay, let's read it the fast way. And they should be able to do lick, that, she, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they still have to sound it out. That is absolutely okay. We sound it out all over again. And then I'll come back and I'll try one more time. Can we try it the fast way? And some of them, they'll be like, oh yeah, I just sounded that one out. It's she. And sometimes they can't, and that's okay. That is okay. Eventually, they're going to get some of the words the fast way, and some of them they will have to practice sounding out for a while. But giving them the confidence to say it's okay to just sound it out sets them up for success when they come across words that they don't recognize or know. They can sound it out. They're not stuck there. I also appreciate that all of this is not in color. I think it focuses the child. Some kids really like color, and I'm not against color. I mean, I use the good and the beautiful, which is like all color. But I appreciate the fact that this is very plain Jane, that it's really focusing on the sounds. And the stories are getting progressively longer. A lot of them repeat words, lots and lots, and that's just to reinforce seeing the word over and over again. I know this looks really busy, and if it is too busy, I have had children where they have taken like a scrap piece of paper. Sorry, I didn't mean to knock my camera. Where I've taken a scrap piece of paper and I've blocked it out so they can see it and they can follow along in this way. Scrap piece of paper, my favorite. But I also don't mind them just seeing all of it and being like, you can read all of this. And it makes it less intimidating when they come across something that's a lot bigger. A lot of my kids have come across these stories and been like, oh, it's so much. I'm never going to get. That's when you get this out and you say, this isn't, see, look, we can break it down into little pieces and we're going to read it one sentence at a time and we're going to talk about it and it's no big deal. But then afterwards remark, look how much of that you read. You read all of that. And was that hard? No, you did it. That was no big deal. All right, so here's where we're going to be transitioning about lesson 49, so about halfway into where they are going to be asked to know these words. The book has decided that lesson 49, for whatever reason, these words they should know just because they have sounded it out. That has never been the case with any of my kids. None of them had come to this and have been like, oh yeah, that's kitten. Like, none of them. They have all sounded these out. And that's okay. That's totally, totally fine for them to sound that out and continue to sounding it out. Eventually, they will. Did was one of those. They could read all of that the fast way easily. Of was another one. These are all kind of funny words too. And in fact, if I can find an example, I will, where they take funny words, like this would phonetically sound like waz. And we'd say, is that how you say the word? No, we say was. And they give them lots of practice in funny words like this. Phonetically, this would read off. But we say of. There's some words like that where they intentionally take funny words that phonetically don't read the way they are spelled, and they practice those. And those are words that you just have to memorize. If you really wanted to, you could get flashcards out and do that if you wanted. Here's an example of them blending. I just noticed that, so we might as well. AR. I call these pirate words. It doesn't say it in here, but I'm like, look, it's a pirate word that says R. So now, how do we rhyme these words together? Far, k, R, t, R, and blending these sounds together. The words get progressively bigger and longer, and they're more or less encouraged to do them the fast way. It's not as crucial. It is okay to continue sounding out those phonograms. All right, now here's an example where they have stopped putting the dots and the lines, and it's intentionally set up so your child can follow along, but also to give them a chance to not see each individual sound. Now we're going to be focusing on the entire word. We know f and ah and g, so maybe is it possible for us to just blend it all together? Fog. And here they introduce the concept of titles. We're still doing lowercase letters. We do have punctuation and ending. We talk about question marks. So there's a little bit of grammar in this, but the main focus is still reading. I like how they set it up with the title, because now they can get a cue. They read lots of cars. What's the story about? Lots of cars. Oh, okay, so we're going to look for words with like cars and maybe lots. All right, so now if we go further ahead, the lettering is getting progressively smaller as it goes. Let's see, this is lesson 68, so we're over halfway. They're writing the end, and it's getting them prepped for reading smaller words so they can start jumping into other books, real books. And about this time is when my kids start going into real readers and being more comfortable with real readers. And about lesson 75, they start talking about the alphabet and the actual letter names. So up to this point, they have only talked about the phonetic sounds. They have not talked about the names of the letters. I am assuming, if you are interested in teaching your child to read, that your kid already knows the letter names. Like, maybe not necessarily associated with the actual letter, but they know how to sing the ABC song. I'm assuming. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. The reason why they do not introduce the letter names until the very end of this program is because it's confusing. It's because it has nothing to do with how the letter sounds. A, yeah, you've got a long sound that says A, and B, well, B. Okay, I can see that connection, but C? See? No, not really. So the letter names are not introduced until very late. If your child already knows their letter names, it's not going to break this program.
It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. But just be aware that they do this intentionally, that the letter names come later, because honestly, letter names are not essential for reading. They're just not. They help you spell, certainly, and they're absolutely worth learning. But in the very beginning of learning how to read, you don't necessarily need your letter names. And this is where things start getting really wonky. They start taking away oh look, here it goes a little farther, but they start taking away how it phonetically looks, the little distar phonograms that they have set up, and they start introducing it into this Times New Roman and saying, look, you can still read even though they don't look like the letters necessarily that you were. It's connecting those new ways of seeing a letter into something else. And so that's what the next few lessons are about, are transitioning into regular script. Now, the transition I have found has always been a little bumpy. I'm not going to lie, it's never been super easy to go from seeing how the letters look phonetically versus seeing how they look like in regular script has never been particularly easy. And if I figure out a way to do it where it is easy, I'll let you know. However, I obviously do not shy away from that. It does happen. Whether that means I need to introduce earlier readers sooner, I mean, that could probably help. Just a heads up, it's definitely not worth skipping out on, like saying, okay, well, I'm not going to do this program because of that reason. No, Mama, it's not that big of a deal. It's not like it killed their reading ability or anything. It's just not as smooth. I think the program could do a better job smoothing that way in. Here's about 80. This is about the time when I start moving them into other things. I start doing their regular language arts program because they are starting to do things that I think regular language arts programs do better anyway, regardless of which one you choose. They're introducing capital letters now. 85, 88, I think, is the longest I ever held out, because one year I was like, I'm going to do the entire thing. I'm going to see what I'm missing out. And we didn't last. We did not last. And it still goes on. Here, I guess we'll look through it together to see what else we've got. So they're doing part 1 and part 2 of different. Here they're showing blended sounds like the ow. So they're still doing phonograms. They're still practicing handwriting. They're still sounding out odd words like wa and, but we say want. So they're still doing everything. It's just now that they are doing it in regular script. But I find at this time, my kids are already very comfortable in reading regular books. And so there's also really no reason to continue on. They are confident in sounding out words. So any word that they don't know, they sound it out. And then they're like, oh yeah. So here we go. Let's see what 100 looks like. 99. There you go, 100. I don't have any sounds here. Hunting for Tigers Part 2. And they still have their picture comprehension and talking about that. And writing their letters. And then it has a what now. Tell you what you do now. You go read books. Oh, here's a suggestion list. This is worth looking at. Of books that they recommend for children to read as after they have finished this. We have Green Eggs and Ham. My kids are screaming. Can you hear that? I probably need to go address that. We've got Green Eggs and Ham and Go Dogs Go. Those are good books to start with. Oh, A Kiss for Little Bear, Henry and Mudge. Love that. Nate the Great. Hey, there you go. Magic Tree House. That seems like a little bit high reading for this. I'm not right. Hop on Pop. Anyway, so they've got some recommendations here, and you can continue with that. So that is the flip through. I hope that was helpful. Let's talk about how I actually teach it. All right, so let's go over some practical tips on how to use this program. I go over the stories multiple times. I don't just do the story once. When I do a lesson the way it's set up,
you have the story at the very end, and it would be very easy to move on to the next story, especially in the very beginning lessons. I make sure that we do the story like twice or something. Some days I don't, just because I feel like she's gotten the words pretty quickly and she's comfortable. But as the stories get progressively longer, we hang out in that story for a really long time. And I'll tell you why. It helps with her comprehension as she's reading it. So not only is she reaffirming words that she's sounding out and picking out patterns, and it helps so much with their comprehension. And this holds true with any early readers. So often we feel like, well, I've read that book, I don't need to read it again. Little kids need to read the same books over and over and over again. That's why babies love reading the same book over and over again. And you're like, oh my gosh, you already know this book. You have it memorized. But it is so good for their brains to see and make connections with what they are reading, and also just helping so much with their fluency. So don't be afraid to hang out, especially as the stories get progressively longer, and just staying in that story, man, and just enjoying it together. The other advice that I would give is do not stress over the sight words. My first year of doing this, I was like, she is never going to be able to learn to read. There are so many sight words. And it wasn't like in note card forms where you can just like flashcard them. And they never were consistent as far as I could tell. I do not have them memorize it. I really don't. This is a phonics-based program for a reason, for my part anyway. And so I continue having my kids sound out all of those words they're supposed to read the fast way. And we'll go through 3, maybe 4 of those sight words where they have sound them out. And then I'll have them come back, circle around, and have them read it again. And sometimes they still have to sound it out, and then we'll circle back and they will get it fast and they'll practice. And that's a good way of them retaining what they have sounded out, and also making a connection of this is how it blends together. So don't stress those sight words. And I know sometimes there's a huge list, and I will break it out into a couple of days, just practicing sounding them out and blending those sounds together, and practicing reading them the fast way does help them eventually when they are reading into the story. So I wouldn't skip reading the fast way. I would just make sure that they are practicing sounding them out to the point where they recognize it instantly. And what they are doing in their brain is they are connecting sounds with letters, and then they're connecting blending sounds together, and then they're connecting the whole word, and they're seeing the whole word for what it is. And then they will recognize that whole word in other parts of different words. So like blended sounds like AR, and blended sounds like OW. Frequently, I will blend those sounds together and I'll say, this is an ow word. Do we see the ow? And then they can pick out now, how, cow very easily because they have seen and blended those words together. And so that's part of with the sight words. Do not stress them out. Definitely do not make them into flashcards. Practice sounding them out until they can get comfortable reading them fast. At the end of each lesson we saw, and I mentioned this briefly when we did the flip through, they have a handwritten portion, right? You practice writing out the sounds that they're working on. And I appreciate that they did this. I have only done it my first year. So the other 3 children did not get that same handwriting practice. Part of it is because I'm a real stickler about when I get my kids writing and using pencil work, because I feel very strongly of the fact that they need time to maneuver and manipulate, and putting undue pressure on them to write early, I don't see as necessary. However, that does not mean that I don't do handwriting, period. I do think there is some value in connecting sounds that you are reading with things that you are manipulating and moving. In fact, I'm going to give out a shout out to my girlfriend, Mama Yaya. I'll just have her channel linked down below, as well as a video that she did about reading and handwriting. And she has so many great ideas and tips. She uses a different program. She uses Logic of English, and that is a phenomenal program as far as I can tell. But she has a lot of good ideas on how to handwrite and how to connect reading. So definitely check that out. out. So we use the Good and the Beautiful handwriting. I really like that they have drawing practice and coloring practice and painting practice in there, because I think it really helps with fine motor skills. And I like that it combines the two. It really marries them well. Initially we used, what's the Handwriting Without Tears? Also a really great program, but it didn't do what the Good and the Beautiful did, and I really appreciated the way they had it set up. So I get the pre-K and the K level of handwriting. And if my kid is begging for it, I'll let them use those handwriting programs. We also practice a little bit on writing their name at this time. All of my kids have really long names. Like, I didn't think that one through when I named them. And so they need practice writing out all of them, all of those letters and where they go or whatever. And so that's our handwriting practice, where we go and we practice writing each of the letters of their name and memorizing how they flow and where it goes. And they really love and appreciate that. And we do it on my whiteboard on the couch, usually snuggled together, and that's our handwriting practice. So if your lesson is going really long, I wouldn't stress about skipping the handwriting. I honestly haven't used it at all since that first year. It just was not worth it, in my opinion. My personal opinion. Another thing to consider when you are doing your stories and you're reading them out, if your kid has a natural flow to what they are reading and they get one of the words wrong, like they say a instead of the, do not interrupt them, do not correct them, do not go back, do not pass go. Like just leave it be, mama, leave it be. And the reason being, what they're doing is they're practicing fluency. Obviously, if they get house and horse mixed up, that needs to be corrected. And those are kind of really big words. That's not in here. But if they get something obviously wrong, then absolutely correct them. If they get some of the particles wrong or some of the words mixed up, I wouldn't stress about it. I would allow the practice of fluency so they can feel how it feels to read without stopping and sounding every single thing out. This book makes a big deal about not letting your children see the pictures before they read the story. And I understand why, because it's a phonics-based program. It wants the children to be sounding out and figuring out the words, not guessing them based on what the picture is. However, I think that it causes undue stress and anxiety on my part, so I don't. If that is something concerning to you and you really want to dive deep into a phonics-based approach, you can use a Post-it note. Most Post-it notes are big enough to cover up the picture, and that's what I have done in the past. I haven't been as stringent with this time around, my fourth time around, just because I do feel like sometimes giving contextual clues is not the end of the world. It is okay if they know that the story is about a dog and a rabbit and a car, like that doesn't bother me too much. What does bother me is that occasionally when you get those early readers, they'll have a sentence and then they'll have a full page of artwork right next to it. And it's very easy to guess what that sentence says based on what that picture is. And research has shown us that that doesn't give us really strong readers. What that does is gives us really strong guessers, people who can see a picture and be like, oh, that's what the sentence is, based on contextual clues. And this program is really set about phonics-based learning where you don't guess the word. You can see the word and you can blend the word and you can figure out the word outside of the clue. Because it's only one picture, that doesn't bother me as much. And so that's why I don't worry quite as strongly about whether or not they use the picture. Another thing that I have found while reading the story is make sure to do it one sentence at a time and you stop it. The way the lesson is set up, and I showed this in the review, is you read the story and then you read it again and ask questions. And the reason it's set up that way is to make sure comprehension and fluency are happening at the same time. And I think that's smart. However, it's very overwhelming to a child when it's that much. When it's that much and they're sounding out quite a bit of it. And so I have them break it down into one sentence increments. They read the sentence once, they read it again fluently, fast way, whatever. And then I ask them, what was that? What does that mean? What did we just hear? Sometimes we alternate. She reads it and then I repeat it after her, and then we talk about it. What did that mean? And I feel like that kind of back and forth where we're actively talking and discussing what she is reading has given her much better comprehension than just reading the whole thing once and then reading it again and asking questions afterwards. That's kind of based on your own discretion, which is why I think the book does it this way, but I'm offering you a different way of doing it. That's the other thing too. I mean, a lot of time early readers read what they're saying, but they don't hear it. They don't hear what they're saying. They're so focused on blending the sounds and whatever, which is totally fine, which is why you would read it afterwards to give them a chance to be like, oh yeah, I can see that and I can follow that and I can see where those sounds are connecting. And it gives them a chance of comprehension. So going back and forth between the two is totally fine and absolutely worth it. Another thing it says is that it is 100 lessons. And it is. Absolutely 100 lessons. I mean, we saw that. It's 100 easy lessons. I have never made it to lesson 100. I know, and I also know other families that have only go up to lesson 50 and that's where they stop. But by the time I have found that they get up to about 87, 88, that range, they are so ready to do just other readers. And by then we have already started transitioning into other early readers and they are comfortable in reading and sounding out and stuff. And I like having them sound out stuff in regular script form a little bit earlier than what's introduced here. And so don't be afraid to stop the book before you've actually reached 100. This is not the book that you have to finish until the end or else, it's not completed or whatever. By the time they get up to lesson 88, they are well in a good foundation of beginning chapter books. And I'm not even exaggerating with that. Typically, when we reach lesson 88, I will be already transitioning us into a more traditional language arts program. The one we use is The Good and the Beautiful. I've been using it for the last 3 years, and we really like it. I think the transition is a little bit rocky, but I haven't done the new kindergarten level yet. So I'm going to be doing that this year, transitioning my newly 5-year-old into that. So that'll be fun. I've heard good things about it and I've seen really good things. So I'm really excited about how they have adapted and changed the kindergarten level. I've had children get done with this in 1 year flat. I've had children take literally 3 years to do it. And I've had some children that just are done, like they just do it. It's not like pulling teeth. A lot of it depends on what age you started at. You can absolutely start this at age 3. I think it's gentle enough to do that. Would I start it with any 3-year-old? No, no, I wouldn't. In fact, my last two, one, she was ready. She was ready by age 5. And I started her just a little before that, probably age 4. And so it took us a little bit longer. For my last one, she's been cruising through this because she's been begging for it. She is highly, highly motivated. And I could have easily started her at age 3, but I was already homeschooling 3 kids and I was pregnant and I didn't want to. And that was totally fine. And also, there's a learning curve too. When you start that young, it's going to take you longer. If you're starting at age 4, maybe you could have started a year earlier, but 4, she's going to get it a little bit quicker because she's older and more mature. So food for thought. I have always set a timer, or, I guess that's a little bit of a lie. I make sure that we do not go past 15 or 20 minutes max, because I do just tend to start my kids a little bit young with this, and their little bodies can't handle that much focus. You know what I mean? Like they're just wiggly and they want to move and they want to go do and whatever. Even my highly motivated ones, I was still like, we're going to stop here at 20 minutes. And the reason being is because 20 minutes a day was plenty and we could get through things faster, and they also retained things more. The few times, my very first year, we were going to do every single lesson and we were going to finish the lesson that day. Oh, that sweet mama. Oh, that sweet first year homeschool mama. She can see me now. She'd be shocked. And it took us some days 45 an hour. And my baby was just like, oh, please, Mom, can't we be done? And I was like, no, we're going to finish. And then we're going to do handwriting. And I was a lot more intense. I was a fun person, I promise. I was a very fun person. As I have gone through this curriculum multiple times, I've realized you really don't need that much attention. In fact, your children are more eager and willing and accepting the material if you do it in shorter spurts of time. So 15, 20 minutes max, and then you set it aside. Doesn't matter where you're at. If you just did the sounds or two of the sounds or whatever, and they were like, that's it, that's all we got today, I'd be like, okay, and just completely back off. And I'll tell you why. Trying to force a child to read before they are ready, if they are so unmotivated that they do not want to sit next to you and learn to read, I'd give it another year. Honestly, I'd just be like, no, you're not ready yet. And that is totally fine. And they will find a time to be ready. You know, so often we're like, oh, I homeschool my kid and they learned to read by the time they were 3.5. And we're so proud of them. We're so proud of them. But at what cost? At what cost? And sometimes I'll see mamas who are like, they didn't click until they were 11, until they were 12. And that's okay too. That is okay. That is okay. I'm not trying to doom your child saying they will not read until they're in 6th grade. But just the fact that those mamas waited and were patient and said, I'm not going to push this. I'm going to wait until you're motivated. Now those readers are like, they shoot off like rockets and they read everything and they love it so much because their mothers were wise enough to know when they were ready for it. So even though we all want genius children, right? We all want genius children or whatever, but you don't need to start at such a super early age in order to get a genius child. A genius child isn't proven by being able to read by the time they're 3.5. I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed when 3.5-year-olds can read chapter books and are, playing Mozart or whatever. There's nothing wrong with being proud with a genius child like that. However, wait until they're so ready for it. And then it will go so much easier for you. So much easier for you. Wow, I went on a really weird tangent there. I was supposed to give a review of this book and I'm like off talking about stuff I didn't want to talk about until next month. Sorry. So that is how we use Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. I hope that video was helpful. If it was, like, subscribe. If it wasn't, tell me what you need and I will give it to you, man. Tell me what questions you have about this program. I'm frequently checking the comments and I will be happy to answer them. Look for a video in May, so you should absolutely subscribe so you can, so you can see it, about thoughts about reading and how to do it, about phonics, about whole word and balanced literacy and that sort of thing. I will be talking about other resources and articles, science-based articles and books that I have read that have really helped in our reading journey. And I will see you all next week. Take it easy, everybody. Bye.